Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, Nerd Mode On, and welcome to episode 1 of Battle Reports, a video series where I'll be going over weapons in Battlefield 4 and breaking down the statistics of the weapon to provide you guys with a better idea of how this weapon is going to perform. So without further ado, let's get started. So for today's briefing, we're going to be looking at the Ace 23. Now this is a very noticeable weapon in Battlefield 4. Many of you guys have probably used it and or been killed by this weapon, and it's always a good thing to kind of digest into the statistics to see why this is a noticeable weapon when it comes to performance. So of course this weapon does clock in at 770 rounds per minute, which also has a pretty good velocity clocking in at 620 meters a second. Now that is pretty on par with the other assault rifles in this category. You know, it's better than some and worse than others, but by and large, there is some pretty heavy statistics there to back up your overall power performance. Now, of course, looking at the overall damage model of this weapon, you will notice that the weapon does 25 damage up until 8 meters, and then of course after 8 meters you're going to see a gradual decline of the overall damage being outputted at range. However, the minimum damage that this weapon will do is 18 damage, and that does happen to reach that point at 55 meters. So anything after 55 meters, you're going to be doing a steady amount of 18 damage, which is pretty decent for the assault rifle category. There's really no deviation when it comes down to the overall outputted damage of weapons in the assault category, but by and large, this is a very standard round, and you should be able to perform up to standards when it comes to the engagements that you'll commonly find yourself in. Now, of course, transitioning into the overall reload speeds as well as the magazine size, you guys are going to notice that the reload speeds are actually pretty adequate for this particular weapon. The short reload is clocking in at 2.1 seconds, as well as the long reload is clocking in at 3.1 seconds. So really not a whole lot of time to be waiting there trying to fiddle with your magazine. Should be pretty quick and up to standards, but it's always in your best interest to keep at least one bullet left in your chamber, considering that is going to be a little bit more proficient when it comes down to it, and you're not going to be hitting that longer reload every time you get into an engagement, which in some cases can be the demise of your overall character if you happen to be constantly hitting that. Now, of course, the Ace 23 does have a 30-round magazine plus one in the chamber. You add both of those together, of course, and you get 31 rounds total, which is a lot of damage that you can put down range. This weapon is very efficient at taking down multiple oppositional players at the same expense. You know, it definitely does go through multiple guys at the same expense as well, followed by, if your accuracy is on par, you can definitely use that 31 round magazine to your best benefit. Now, of course, probably the most important statistic when it comes into contact with a weapon is to decide what the recoil numbers are and how effective this weapon is going to be at engagements that it's designed for. So far, we've covered quite a bit of great stuff when it comes down to being an overall aggressive player, as well as being able to compensate the least for the weapon when it comes to ranged fire. However, is the recoil numbers adequate with what we desire? Now, of course, looking at the horizontal size of it, you guys are going to see that the left pole has a 0.15, while the right pole has a 0.25. Now, that means it's going to be tending a little bit more to the right, so I mean, obviously compensating would be to pull to the left. However, we look at the vertical side of things, and you'll see it has a 0.36 vertical recoil. So to counter this, to make it a little bit more centered mass, if you're going to be commonly hitting that up and to the right recoil, you would just simply pull down into the left to kind of push it back into the middle of the screen. That way you're not having to micro adjust on the time, you're not going to have to burst as many bullets, and you can definitely do a lot more adequate firing when it comes down to the main gist of it. And finally, the last little bit of information I would like to talk with you guys about is the aiming down sight accuracy as well as the hipfire accuracy. These are two important things that you will commonly come into every single time you play Battlefield 4, no matter if you're a pro player or maybe you're a novice player. These are going to be things that you need to take into account, especially when it comes down to maintaining the benefits that your weapon brings to the table. So of course, starting off with the aiming down sight accuracy, or more commonly seen as ADS in some cases, you guys will notice that if you are not moving, you are absolutely still, you'll be achieving a 0.2 aiming down sight accuracy with this specific weapon. Of course, this number can change depending on which assault rifle you're using or category, especially when it comes down to the guns in Battlefield 4, but for this specific case, it has been listed as 0.2. However, if you're deciding to maybe be a little bit more strafe happy, maybe it's something that you're just commonly used to in other first-person shooters and you happen to be diddling around back and forth and going forward and backwards and maybe doing some sprinting, you are going to be penalized at a 1 aiming down sight accuracy, which is sufficiently higher than if you were not moving. So it's always in your best interest to not be moving when you shoot. It's going to be a lot more beneficial, as well as give you a sufficient advantage when it comes to the battlefield, considering that many players are used to the run and gun style of other first-person shooters, which in that case they will be penalized with that 1 accuracy when it comes to aiming down sight. Now, of course, redirecting your guys' eyes over to the hipfire information, of course, if you're standing absolutely still while standing, you'll achieve a 3.0 hipfire accuracy. However, if you are crouching, you achieve a 2.5, and if you decide to go prone, of course, you will be granted with a 2 accuracy when it comes down to hipfire. So that is a lot better. If you're not moving, you're going to quickly notice that your overall ability to hip fire with a decent amount of accuracy is sufficiently better than it would be if you decide to move around. Now, of course, I'll transition into you guys looking at the numbers if you were moving around, maybe you were skirting around on the ground and so forth, to kind of get an idea of what kind of penalty comes along with that. So, of course, if you're standing up while maybe moving back and forth, maybe you're strafing to dodge some bullets, you are going to be penalized with a 3.5 standing hip fire accuracy. Of course, if you decide to go crouch and move back and forth, you're going to be penalized with a 3.0 hip fire accuracy. And finally, if you're prone and you're skirting around on the ground, you're going to be penalized with a 2.5 prone hip fire accuracy. Now, of course, that doesn't sound too bad. It's only 0.5 higher than the previous numbers that we went over, but that's still a penalty. That's still definitely not something that you want to envelop into your gaming style, and it's always in your best interest to try to get down the basics right away, so that way in the future you're always a lot better when it comes to engagements that you should be winning on a consistent basis. But anyway, guys, that has been this episode of Battle Reports. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully some information was new to you guys, and hopefully it gave you an idea of how the weapon performs, as well as breaking down the statistics a little bit easier for everybody to understand. Anyway, guys, I'll see you in the next installation, and until then, guys, this is NMO, and I'm going to be signing out. Peace.